I know you came from Goldman Sachs, and I was reading this note that they were saying that the long-lasting impact of sanctions could almost be relatable to the breakdown of Yukos oil in terms of how much it will do to foreign investment. Do you agree with this view?
No, I completely disagree, because we have good Russian growth, 2%. We actually had $14 trillion of assets under management with dinner we had with President Putin. It started at 11 o'clock last night, went past midnight, and we are investing very actively with our partners. We invested around $16 billion over the last several years, lots of money going into infrastructure, and we have partnerships with Middle Eastern and Asian funds. So lots of people continue to invest in Russia, and the economy is doing great, in large part because of the oil pact with Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, that is, of course, one of the bright spots, the oil price moving higher and inflation moving higher. But how are you coping with the impact of sanctions?
Well, frankly, in our analysis, sanctions may have 10 to 20% of the total impact, and the other impact was decline in oil price a couple of years ago. So with oil price being back up, sanctions really have not much effect. You know, of course, stock market went down quite a bit when the last round was announced, but it's back up, pretty much to the level it was before.
But without a direct impact, doesn't it change the framework or the mentality of the climate of how people feel about investing in Russia?
Well, of course, and it's bad for Russia. It's also bad for Europe. It's bad for our partners. You know, we met with lots of German executives who are suffering because their revenue is declining. They cannot work too much with Russia. But we're still finding lots of partners in Asia, lots of partners in the Middle East. 90% of our co-investments now, and we are 90% of the private equity investment in Russia, they come from the Middle East and Asia.
A lot of your partners and investors are other sovereign wealth funds. Why not private investors?
Well, we do have some private investors, but frankly, sovereign wealth funds, they manage large sums of money. Saudi Arabia committed to us $10 billion, out of which already almost $2 billion were invested in less than a year. So the ability to really, have lots of capital that we can deploy jointly and also have joint expertise in joint projects. We invested in France with a local fund that now allowed us to expand into Russia and Asia and Middle East because of the help of our partner sovereign wealth funds.
A goal of yours was to make the economy less dependent on oil. Have you been able to move the needle on this?
Well, our big priorities investors are in infrastructure and technology. 40% is infrastructure, 25% technology. I think we are moving in that direction, maybe not fast enough, but definitely President is quite focused on infrastructure spending, on technology investment. So we believe that Russia now is moving into this direction faster than before.
And when you wake up in the morning, what is for you the most important indicator of the Russian economy?
Well, of course, growth is important, but we're also looking at growth by sectors, and we see.
But is it the ruble, the oil price?
Well, oil price, of course, is important. Ruble is now a little bit, not necessarily following the oil price. But at the end of the day, we also look, obviously, at inflation, at interest rates, and macroeconomy is very solid right now. So we believe the foundations of our macroeconomy are so solid that government and president can really undertake this investment push that he is going to be talking about during the plenary today. And it's going to be successful because Russia has strong macroeconomic fundamentals.
This conference is focused on building the economy of trust. Do you think there is a lack of trust towards Russia, given the current climate?
Well, I think there is lack of trust, but also there is lack of understanding. We were discussing how we need to re-engage with many countries. President Macron is here, Prime Minister Abe. Prime Minister Abe will stop by our RDF house to discuss Russia-Japan investments. And this communication is very important because Russia has its view. It's important to understand this view. And people who understand this view and have a discussion are much more successful. And it's not surprising that yesterday, one-on-one, President Putin and President Macron spoke for almost 3 hours discussing different things.
We have, yes, Macron here, Abe here, Wang from China here. Out of the three, China, France, and Japan, who do you think is more crucial for Russia?
Well, it's difficult to choose, but, with China, we have a great Russia-China fund, more than 20 investments, and we invest in jointly with China a lot. Japan fund, we announced in 4 investments today, and also very active for us. And France is a great connection to Europe, very important one. And Macron spoke a lot about the historic connection of France and Russia before. So all those are very important, and we'll be working with all of those, of course. And we want Russia to be really a positive partner to all of those countries.
Russian direct investment fund head Kirill Dmitriev. Thank you so much for joining Bloomberg here at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum.